Usually when we sit down and, usually when we sit down and look at a business success story, there's this expectation of gravity, like basic physics.
Right. What goes up actually has a foundation.
Exactly. Like a company makes a genuinely great product, consumers buy that product, the revenues go up, and the overall valuation of the company reflects that fundamental reality.
Yeah, it's empirical. It's grounded in a tangible exchange of value.
Right. Cash in, cash out. It's clean. You can look at the balance sheet and the accountant points to the bottom line and says, well, there it is. That's the business.
And it's comforting. As analysts, and I think just as people navigating the economy, we really like things to be verifiable. We want the narrative of a company to be anchored to actual math.
But then you step into the reality distortion field of modern venture capital.
Oh, yeah.
The hypergrowth startups and especially celebrity-backed spirits brands. And suddenly that gravity is it's just gone.
Completely unmoored.
Yeah. You find yourself looking at a corporate landscape that makes absolutely no sense. And we are looking at a story today for you that asks a staggering question. How does a company go from being celebrated globally as the fastest growing independent American whiskey brand in U.S. history, boasting a self-reported $1.1 billion valuation, by the way,
Right.
to suddenly burning $1 million a month, facing federal subpoenas, and having its founders literally locked out of their own production facilities by a federal court?
I mean, it is the absolute definition of a financial freefall. And what makes this particular case so profound and, frankly, so tragic is that it isn't just a story about spreadsheets or, overzealous executives. This is the collapse of a brand that was built on a deeply important, culturally resonant historical legacy. It meant something profound to the industry and to the consumers who supported it.
Exactly. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking you on a rigorous investigative breakdown of the rapid rise and the really sudden, shocking collapse of Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey.
It's quite a ride.
It really is. Our mission today is to figure out exactly how a billion-dollar empire turned out to be an illusion. And to piece this together, we are pulling from a massive stack of sources.
And they paint wildly different pictures depending on where you look.
Totally. On one side, we have the cold, hard reality of court filings from a federal receivership in Tennessee and forensic quarterly financial reports.
Right.
On the other side, we have deep dive investigations from business publications like CFO.com, which look at the accounting failures, and that's contrasted with craft spirits magazines that for years were printing these glowing PR narratives.
Yeah, the contrast is jarring.
It is. We're also pulling heavily from incredibly detailed local news coverage from the Moore County Observer and the Lynchburg Times. They've been watching this unfold right in their own backyard.
And I think we need to establish right up front that digesting these sources requires a highly analytical approach.
Definitely.
What we are unraveling today isn't a simple story of a small business failing because, the market didn't like the product.
Right, because the whiskey is actually great.
The whiskey itself is universally acclaimed. Instead, what we are looking at is this exceedingly complex, multi-layered web of alleged financial mismanagement, evaporated ledgers, high-profile undisclosed loans.
The undisclosed loans are wild.
Oh, we will get to those.
Yeah.
And a vicious legal battle for control of a brand that was supposed to correct a historical injustice.
So let's start the foundation. Because to truly grasp the tragedy of what has happened to this company financially, you really have to understand the triumph of what it represented culturally.
Absolutely.
The entire brand is named after Nathan Nearest Green.
Yes. And Nearest Green is a foundational, though for a long time obscured, figure in the history of American whiskey.
Right.
We are going back to the 1850s here. Green was a formerly enslaved man living in Tennessee, working on a farm owned by a preacher and distiller named Dan Call. And Nearest Green was a master distiller.
He wasn't just helping out, he was the guy.
He was the guy. He didn't just make whiskey. He is credited with essentially perfecting what is known in the industry as the Lincoln County process.
Okay, I've heard that term thrown around a lot in bourbon circles. That's the charcoal filtration technique, right?
That's the one.
But what does it actually do to the spirit, like chemically?
Chemically, it's a fascinating process. So before the unaged whiskey, the clear distillate, which is often called white dog, before that goes into the oak barrels to age, it is slowly dripped through several feet of densely packed maple sugar charcoal.
Oh, wow. Several feet.
Yeah, it's a massive vat. And this charcoal acts as a chemical filter. It strips out the harsh congeners and impurities that get created during fermentation and distillation.
So it smooches it out.
Exactly. It essentially softens the bite of the alcohol and imparts this very faint, sweet smokiness. It gives the spirit an incredibly smooth, distinct flavor profile.
That sounds amazing.
It is. And this technique is widely believed to trace its roots back to water purification and food preparation traditions from West Africa, which were brought over to the American South by enslaved people.
Wow.
And legally, this specific process is the defining difference between a Kentucky bourbon and a Tennessee whiskey.
Right, because Kentucky bourbon doesn't do the charcoal thing.
Exactly. And Nearest Green perfected this art form. And on that farm, he took a young, orphan boy under his wing as an apprentice and taught him everything he knew about distillation.
And that boy's name was Jack Daniel.
Jack Daniel.
Literally one of the most recognizable brands on the planet.
Yep.
And for over a century, Nearest Green's role as the first known African-American master distiller and, the man who taught Jack Daniel the craft that built a global empire, it was largely omitted from mainstream history.
It was. It was a local legend, maybe known to historians, but definitely not to the average consumer.
Until Fawn Weaver enters the picture.
Precisely. So Fawn Weaver is a highly successful serial entrepreneur from California. She learns about the story of Nearest Green and is just completely captivated by it.
As anyone would be. It's an incredible story.
It is. And initially, her goal is purely historical. She wants to write a book about his life and ensure his legacy is cemented. But as she digs deeper into the archives and the local lore, she actually visits the original 313-acre farm in Lynchburg, Tennessee.
Where Green actually lived and distilled.
Right. And she falls entirely in love with the physical space and the legacy. So she purchases the farm, and pivoting from just a book project, she decides to resurrect the legacy in liquid form.
Wow.
So in 2017, she launches Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey.
Which is just a brilliant, inspiring origin story. And the market responds to it with incredible enthusiasm. I mean, the launch is nothing short of explosive.
Oh, it was massive.
Within a remarkably short window of time, Uncle Nearest becomes the first Black-owned whiskey distillery in America. They are super aggressive with their expansion, securing distribution in all 50 states.
Which is really hard to do in the liquor business.
Incredibly hard. The laws vary so much by state, but they managed to get their bottles placed on the shelves of 30,000 retail stores. It cements its place as the biggest Black-owned spirits company in U.S. history.
The narrative was just universally praised by the press.
Yeah. And crucially, the product itself backs up the hype. It is genuinely fantastic whiskey, but right at the peak of this cultural and commercial triumph, we hit the first glaring anomaly in our financial sources.
Yeah, the valuation discrepancy.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly happened here?
Well, this is where the divergence between the public relations narrative and the private ledger begins to reveal itself.
Yeah.
And the scale of the disconnect is extraordinary.
How big of a disconnect are we talking?
So in 2023, Fawn Weaver publicly and repeatedly declared that the company was worth $1.1 billion.
Billion with a B.
With a B. She essentially crowned Uncle Nearest as a unicorn in the spirits world, a privately held startup valued at over $1 billion. She was conducting this victory lap in the financial media. She was giving interviews on CNBC, speaking on NPR. She was even a guest investor on Shark Tank.
Wow, okay. So she's everywhere.
Everywhere. She was projecting an image of an unstoppable, historically significant corporate juggernaut.
But the court documents and the forensic accounting tell a chillingly different story once the curtain gets pulled back.
They really do.
If we fast forward just 2 years to 2025 and early 2026, the company is forced into receivership. A federal judge appoints a receiver named Philip G. Young Jr. to take total control of the company.
Right.
And his first mandate is to figure out what the company is actually worth. So he steps in, conducts a forensic accounting of the actual physical assets, the real estate, the distilling equipment, the aging barrels of whiskey, the financial assets.
And his conclusion?
His conclusion is that the actual value of the enterprise is closer to $100 million.
I mean, that is a 90% evaporation of value.
90%.
We are talking about roughly 1/10 of the valuation Weaver was claiming on national television just 24 months prior.
It's insane.
And the discrepancy wasn't limited to some abstract future-facing valuation multiple either. It extended to the raw, day-to-day cash flow.
Wait, the actual revenue was fake too?
Well, Fawn Weaver was stating in interviews that they were on a clear glide path to hit $100 million in revenue in 2024. And she was officially reporting corporate income to lenders and partners at around $71 million.
Okay, $71 million.
But when the receiver gained access to the verified bank deposits and the actual sales receipts, the real revenue was hovering around $41 million.
Oh my God.
She had allegedly overstated the company's top-line revenue by $30 million.
I need to stop and ask a fundamental question here, because as someone reading these numbers, it feels absurd. Why would a founder do this? What is the strategic advantage of artificially inflating your revenue and your valuation to that extreme degree, knowing that eventually the math has to reconcile?
To understand the motivation, you really have to look at the psychological and structural traps of the modern venture capital ecosystem.
Okay, lay it on me.
In that world, steady, profitable, incremental growth is often viewed as a failure.
Right. It's not sexy enough.
Exactly. Hypergrowth is the only metric that captures attention. If you can project a narrative that your revenue is doubling or tripling year over year, you become a magnet for institutional investment capital.
People just throw money at you.
Yes. Furthermore, and this is crucial for a capital-intensive business like whiskey, it makes you incredibly attractive to commercial banks. Inflated revenue figures and sky-high valuations allow a company to secure extraordinarily large revolving credit lines.
So it's like taking out a mortgage on a mansion based on the salary you hope to make in 5 years, rather than the paycheck you're actually depositing today.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. You build an operational structure whose very survival relies entirely on the assumption that explosive growth will never slow down.
Which is terrifying.
It is. You start spending actual cash launching nationwide marketing blitzes, hiring bloated executive teams, buying premium real estate based on the $100 million you say you are going to make, rather than the $41 million actually hitting your operating account.
But how does a discrepancy of that magnitude go unchecked? Like, if I go to a bank to get a business loan for a bakery, they want to see 3 years of tax returns, bank statements, and a business plan.
They want blood, basically.
Right. So how on earth did the spirits industry, sophisticated investors, and institutional lenders buy into a $1.1 billion valuation without demanding an independent third-party audit checking the math?
It is the defining mystery of this entire collapse. And it really speaks volumes about the intoxicating power of a perfect narrative.
Yeah.
When a story hits every cultural touchstone, correcting a profound historical injustice, led by a charismatic, telegenic founder, demonstrating rapid initial footprint expansion in retail, people desperately want to believe it's true.
The FOMO is real.
Exactly. Investors fall victim to FOMO, the fear of missing out on the next big cultural phenomenon. Lenders see the endless positive press, the celebrity associations, the Shark Tank appearances, and sometimes the rigorous, skeptical due diligence that should be mandatory takes a back seat to the hype.
That is just wild to me.
In fact, the receiver noted with absolute astonishment in his reports to the court that there had never been an independent financial audit of the company.
Wait. Never.
No.
Never been an independent audit for a company claiming to be worth over $1 billion.
Not once.
That is terrifying. It means the entire financial scaffolding was built on the honor system, which inevitably leads us to the consequences. I mean, the illusion of $1 billion empire requires an astonishing burn rate of cash to maintain. Where was that river of cash coming from, and what happened when the well ran dry in the summer of 2025?
So the primary engine fueling this aggressive expansion was a Kentucky-based agricultural lending cooperative called Farm Credit Mid-America. They had extended a massive, multi-tiered credit facility to Uncle Nearest. But the music stopped abruptly in the summer of 2025. Farm Credit filed a devastating lawsuit against the company for repeatedly defaulting on their loan obligation.
At how much was in default?
The total amount in default, $108 million.
$108 million. For a company broadcasting $1 billion valuation, you would assume they had the liquidity to service their primary debt.
You would assume. But they were entirely tapped out.
And as if a 9-figure default wasn't bad enough, during the initial legal skirmishing over this lawsuit, a secondary bombshell drops into the public court records. Farm Credit discovers a hidden $20 million loan.
Yes, and the source of this loan grabbed headlines immediately.
I remember this.
Yeah, it was a $20 million injection from Marcypen, which is a venture capital fund partly owned by the cultural icon and rapper Jay-Z.
Now, I want to clarify something for you listening, because to the average consumer, hearing that a brand secured a $20 million investment from a fund associated with Jay-Z sounds like a monumental victory.
Right? It sounds like amazing PR.
Yeah, it sounds like the ultimate cultural validation. So why is this discovery framed in the court documents as a catastrophic negative revelation?
To grasp the severity of this, we really need to dive into the strict mechanics of commercial lending.
Okay.
When a bank like Farm Credit extends a $108 million credit line, they don't just hand over a wire transfer and wish the founders good luck.
Right. There are rules.
Huge rules. The borrower is required to sign an incredibly dense, restrictive legal agreement governed by what are called covenants. These covenants are inflexible rules dictating exactly how the company can operate financially.
Okay.
And one of the most absolute non-negotiable covenants in senior secured lending is that the borrower cannot take on secondary, undisclosed debt without the primary lender's explicit written permission.
Because it fundamentally alters the financial physics of the company.
Exactly. Think of it like a structural engineer insuring a skyscraper. They calculate the wind resistance and the load-bearing capacity based on a specific set of blueprints.
Okay, I'm following.
If the developer secretly decides to add a 10-story iron appendage to the side of the building without telling the engineer, the entire structural integrity is compromised.
It's going to fall over.
Right. The bank priced their interest rate and assessed their risk based on a specific ratio of debt to revenue. If you secretly take on another $20 million in debt, you have suddenly added massive new liabilities and new interest payments that will drain your available cash flow.
That makes total sense.
And more dangerously, you now have another aggressive creditor who might try to lay claim to the company's finite assets if the business fails.
So they're fighting over the scraps?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hiding a $20 million venture capital loan from your primary senior lender isn't just a minor administrative oversight. It is a catastrophic breach of trust. It violates the core tenets of corporate finance and usually triggers an immediate automatic default on the primary loan.
Wow. And Fawnweaver actually testified under oath in February that the company did not initially disclose that Marcy Penn loan to their primary creditors.
She did.
But that hidden $20 million was just one piece of a rapidly expanding financial black hole. When the receiver finally took the wheel and started opening the mail, he found that beyond the $108 million owed to Farm Credit, the company had racked up an additional $50 million in unpaid bills.
Just sitting there.
Yeah, unpaid bills to various vendors and unsecured creditors. This brings the total known verifiable debt load to at least $158 million.
And we must anchor that number back to the receiver's valuation.
Right, the $100 million.
Yeah. He estimated the total optimistic value of the company's physical and brand assets at around $100 million.
Okay.
So mathematically, they are underwater by nearly $60 million.
Yikes.
The company is functionally and hopelessly insolvent. By the time the receiver was appointed and stepped onto the property, the company was burning through $1 million of cash every single month and was actively struggling to make payroll for its employees.
I really want you to put yourself in the shoes of a vendor for a moment. Let's say you own a logistics company moving pallets of whiskey across the country, or, you supply the custom glass bottles or print the labels.
Yeah, the day-to-day folks.
Right. And you are owed a significant piece of that $50 million shortfall. You are sitting in your office reading glowing profiles in business magazines about this $1.1 billion unicorn.
It's infuriating.
You are watching the founder dispense business advice on national television. You hear about backing from celebrity venture funds, and yet your invoices from Uncle Nearest are sitting unpaid for 90, 120, 150 days.
Yeah.
How does a company with that much high-profile blue-chip backing end up bleeding $1 million a month and failing to pay the people who make their product a reality?
It is the inevitable result when a company's operational cash flow becomes entirely dependent on continuous infusions of new debt rather than actual sustainable profit margins from selling a product.
So they were just living on borrowed money.
Entirely. If your daily operating costs the relentless national marketing campaigns, the expansive travel budgets, the bloated executive salaries, the aggressive real estate acquisitions, if all of that is vastly exceeding the actual profit you clear from selling a bottle of whiskey, you aren't running a business. You are just incinerating capital.
Right.
The moment the primary lender peers behind the curtain, realizes the true financial state, and shuts off the credit spigot, the illusion vanishes and the company hits a brick wall at full speed.
Well, speaking of peering behind the curtain and looking at the true financials, we have arrived at what I honestly consider the most mind-boggling, surreal detail in this entire saga.
So this is the best part.
It is wild. So the receiver is appointed by a federal judge. He has the absolute legal authority to take over the company. His very first directive is to open the accounting software, look at the ledgers, and figure out where $158 million went.
Naturally.
And what does he discover? The books essentially did not exist.
The sheer audacity of the situation the receiver walked into is difficult to overstate. In his official, sworn reports to the federal court, Receiver Philip Young stated that all financial records prior to the year 2024 had been mysteriously and permanently deleted from the company's computer systems.
Well, let that sink in. Deleted.
Wiped.
Completely wiped out. A highly publicized corporation operating since 2017, generating tens of millions in claimed revenue, taking on well over $100 million in complex debt instruments, and poof, every financial record, every invoice, every ledger entry before 2024 is simply gone.
And when the receiver demanded an explanation, current employees claimed that a disgruntled fired worker had executed the deletion on their way out the door.
Oh, come on.
Right. Now, if you know anything about modern enterprise resource planning system software like NetSuite or SAP, which a company of this scale would absolutely be using, this explanation strains credulity to the breaking point.
Yeah, that doesn't just happen.
It doesn't. These systems are entirely cloud-based. They have redundant backups, and more importantly, they have strict, immutable administrative audit trails.
So they track everything.
Everything. A mid-level employee cannot simply hit a delete key and permanently vaporize 7 years of complex corporate financial history without leaving digital fingerprints everywhere. It requires high-level administrative access and a deliberate effort to bypass backup protocols.
It's the corporate equivalent of the dog ate my homework, except the homework is a multi-million-dollar ledger and the dog is living in a $2.2 million house on Martha's Vineyard.
Exactly.
We'll get to the Martha's Vineyard house in a second. But from an investigative standpoint, where does that deletion leave the receiver?
It leaves him in a forensic nightmare.
I can't even imagine.
It creates a massive intentional void. Without the primary centralized ledger, it becomes exponentially more difficult to reconstruct years of complex financial transactions. How do you track the specific movement of loan disbursements? How do you verify what the historical revenue actually was versus what was claimed?
You can't.
Right. The receiver is forced to painstakingly rebuild the company's entire financial history from scratch. He's relying on fragmented secondary sources, subpoenaing individual bank statements, scouring recovered emails, and literally begging vendors for past invoices. It is a monumental waste of time and resources designed to obscure the truth.
But the digital bonfire doesn't stop with the internal ledgers. The receiver made another discovery that involves the federal government.
Oh, yeah?
He revealed to the court that Uncle Nearest had failed to file federal income tax returns for 5 consecutive years, dating all the way back to 2018.
We have to contextualize the severity of this.
Please do.
We are analyzing a highly visible corporation executing business in all 50 states and manufacturing alcohol. Alcohol is one of the most intensely monitored, heavily regulated consumer products in the United States, subject to microscopic state and federal oversight.
Oh, for sure.
And yet, for half a decade, this company simply ignored their obligation to file corporate federal tax returns.
I am genuinely baffled by the logistics of this. If you or I skip filing our personal taxes for a couple of years, the IRS is sending aggressive letters, they're garnishing wages, they're knocking on the door.
You're getting audited immediately.
Exactly. How does a company operating in 50 states literally just not file taxes for 5 years without the IRS immediately shutting them down and seizing the distillery?
It is a phenomenal question, and it usually comes down to the bureaucratic siloing of different types of taxation.
Okay, what does that mean?
It is virtually guaranteed that Uncle Nearest was meticulously paying their federal excise taxes on the actual production of the alcohol.
Okay.
The Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, the TTB, they oversee this, and they are notoriously ruthless. If you don't pay your excise taxes barrel by barrel, the physical product is legally prohibited from leaving the warehouse. The business stops that day.
Got it.
Similarly, they were likely remitting state sales taxes and employee payroll taxes, which are monitored heavily at the local level.
So they are paying the taxes required to keep the lights on and the trucks moving.
It's exactly. But federal corporate income tax is a different beast entirely. It taxes net profit. If a company is structurally unprofitable, aggressively burning through venture capital and loan money, and constantly showing a net operating loss, which all evidence suggests Uncle Nearest was, they likely did not actually owe any federal income tax dollars.
Okay, but you still have to tell the IRS that, right?
Yes, and that is the critical legal distinction.
Yeah.
You are still absolutely required by federal law to file the extensive return documents to formally declare and prove those losses to the IRS. Failing to file those returns for 5 years suggests one of two things.
Which are?
Either There was a catastrophic, unbelievable breakdown of internal financial controls and sheer incompetence in the finance department.
Okay.
Or, much more concerningly, it was a deliberate strategic refusal to create an official, sworn penalty of perjury record of the company's disastrous financial reality.
And why might an executive team desperately want to avoid putting their financial reality on the official record? Well, the court filings point towards some highly questionable, potentially devastating spending habits.
Yes, they do.
The most glaring example brought forward by the lenders is the Martha's Vineyard estate. Farm Credit, the primary lender who is out $108 million, formally accused founders Fawn and Keith Weaver of improperly diverting loan funds to purchase a $2.2 million luxury house on Martha's Vineyard.
Right near the Obamas, supposedly.
Yeah, reportedly located in the exact same exclusive enclave as the Obamas estate.
And this allegation plunges us into the incredibly murky, legally perilous waters of related party transactions.
Explain that for me.
Farm Credit alleges that the millions used for this luxury property did not flow directly from the main corporate account. Instead, they claim the money was funneled through a separate, affiliated entity, a shell LLC or special purpose vehicle, that was explicitly not listed as one of the authorized borrowers on the primary loan agreement.
So they hid the purchase.
Furthermore, they allege that after using the diverted funds to buy the estate, this property was later pledged as collateral to secure a loan from an entirely different lender.
Hey, hold on. Let me make sure I'm mapping this correctly because this sounds wild.
It is wild.
The allegation is that they take money borrowed from Bank A. They quietly move that money into a separate side business they control. They use that side business to buy a $2.2 million luxury house, and then they go to Bank B, point to the house, and say, look at this asset we own. We'll pledge this as collateral if you give us more money.
If the allegations detailed in the court filings are proven true, that is the exact mechanism. Now, we must be precise here. Moving capital between legitimately affiliated businesses related party transactions is not inherently equal. Massive conglomerates do it daily.
Sure.
However, these transactions become highly problematic and routinely cross the line into civil or even criminal fraud if they lack three critical elements. First, they must be properly reviewed and approved by an independent board of directors. Second, they must be meticulously and accurately recorded in the corporate ledger. And third, they must be explicitly disclosed to all investors and senior lenders so they understand where the capital is flowing.
And considering we already know the legends were deleted and the taxes weren't filed, I'm guessing none of those three elements were present.
Precisely. When you synthesize these allegations, hiding a $20 million secondary loan, diverting capital to buy a $2.2 million estate through a non-borrowing entity, cross-collateralizing that estate, deleting 7 years of financial records, and ignoring the IRS for 5 years, the picture it paints is incredibly damning.
It's a disaster.
It suggests, at the very best, a disastrous, historically bad lack of corporate oversight. At worst, it suggests a deliberate, orchestrated campaign to conceal the commingling of corporate debt with personal assets.
With the money missing, the digital records incinerated, the taxes unpaid, and the company totally and functionally insolvent, the pressure reached a boiling point. A vicious, multi-directional legal war erupted.
Oh, the blame game.
Everyone involved started pointing fingers, desperately trying to assign the blame for a $158 million crater. This brings us to a phase of the story that is honestly a masterclass in corporate dysfunction and the collapse of fiduciary duty.
It truly is a spectacular unraveling of corporate governance. Let's start with the founders' initial defensive maneuver.
Right.
In January 2026, as the walls were closing in, Fawn and Keith Weaver filed a lawsuit against their own former chief financial officer, a man named Michael Senzaki.
Throwing him right under the bus.
Completely. Their core allegation was that Senzaki essentially went rogue and operated a shadow finance department. They claimed he maliciously manipulated the financial records, actively concealed massive, mounting liabilities from the executive team, forged internal corporate documents, and artificially inflated the accounting value of their physical whiskey inventory to hide the insolvency.
So the CEO's defense is essentially, I am innocent of the financial mismanagement because I had absolutely no idea what was happening. The CFO cooked the books completely independently.
That's their stance.
Senzaki, as you might expect, has vehemently and completely denied these claims in his responses. But just as you think this is going to be a standard founder versus CFO lawsuit, we get a massive plot twist.
A huge one.
The court-appointed receiver, whose sole legal mandate is to protect and recover the assets for the creditors, looks at this chaotic mess and files a major counterclaim. But he doesn't just target the supposedly rogue CFO. He aims his legal artillery at the primary lender, Farm Credit Mid-America.
This is a fascinating, highly aggressive legal maneuver by the receiver. He essentially alleges that Farm Credit was asleep at the wheel and failed at the most basic industry-standard verification procedures required in commercial lending.
Like what?
According to the receiver's filing, Farm Credit allowed CFO Michael Senzaki to submit 28 separate consecutive draw requests on the massive credit line. These 28 withdrawals total nearly $67 million.
Oh, goodness.
And the receiver argues that Farm Credit treated the CFO as the absolute unquestioned sole point of contact, dispersing $67 million without ever picking up the phone to verify the massive withdrawals with the CEO, Fawn Weaver, or the board of directors.
The receiver is basically standing in front of the bank and saying, you can't complain that you were robbed when you left the vault door wide open and handed the keys to one guy without checking his ID.
Exactly.
But he goes even further than that, right? He claims the bank actively ignored screaming red flags in the math.
He does. The most egregious example cited by the receiver involves something called a borrowing-based certificate.
Okay, what is that?
In asset-backed lending, a company can't just draw down their whole credit line at once. Every month, they have to submit a document calculating the current value of their eligible collateral, in this case, aging barrels of whiskey and bottled inventory. The bank then applies an advance rate, loaning a percentage of that specific value.
Yeah.
The receiver alleges that during one routine inspection, it was discovered that Uncle Nearest's borrowing base was overstated by a staggering $21 million.
Wait, $21 million?
Yes. The collateral simply did not exist to support the debt. Yet, according to the receiver, the bank ignored this massive discrepancy and kept authorizing new loans.
Wait, how does a sophisticated agricultural lender look at a $21 million hole in the collateral, the very assets securing their risk, and just shrug and keep the money flowing?
The receiver's theory provides a very cynical answer to that question. He claims the bank turned a blind eye because Farm Credit was aggressively harvesting fees.
Oh, of course, follow the money.
Every time they expanded the credit facility or processed these massive draw requests, they were collecting lucrative loan origination and amendment fees. The filings suggest the bank collected roughly $400,000 in these fees while ignoring the structural rot of the company they were lending to.
Okay, I want to push back on this a bit and play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
Imagine you are a senior loan officer at Farm Credit. You are generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees for your division every quarter by servicing this buzzy, high-profile, fast-growing whiskey brand that is on the cover of magazines.
You're the hero of the office.
Exactly. Do you really want to look too closely at the underlying math and ruin the party? If a borrowing base is magically overstated by $21 million, maybe the internal psychology is to squint, look at the $1.1 billion PR valuation and say, well, they're growing so fast, the actual inventory will eventually catch up to the ledger.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
So was the lender genuinely a victim of an incredibly sophisticated document forging internal fraud by a rogue CFO? Or were they a willing, eager participant in reckless lending because the immediate fee generation blinded their risk department?
You've just described the classic moral hazard that infects lending institutions during an economic boom cycle. Lenders often become overly reliant on the aura of success and the polished presentations of the C-suites, rather than doing the grueling work of counting barrels in a warehouse. If the CFO was actively forging official documents, as the Weavers claim, the bank has a strong legal argument that they were actively criminally deceived.
Sure.
However, ignoring a verified $21 million discrepancy in physical collateral is exceptionally difficult to defend under standard commercial underwriting protocols.
Right.
It strongly indicates that the euphoria surrounding the Uncle Nearest brand clouded the fundamental financial judgment of the people paid to manage risk.
That makes sense.
The receiver is synthesizing this chaos and pointing out a systemic, total collapse of corporate governance. The lender trusted the CFO without verifying, the CEO blamed the CFO for hiding everything, and the receiver is looking at both of them saying, you both completely failed your fiduciary duties.
And while the receiver is waging a legal war against the lender regarding their underwriting failures, he is simultaneously fighting a brutal war on a third front, directly against Fawn Weaver herself.
Oh yeah, this gets messy.
Weaver fiercely and publicly fought the imposition of the receivership. She filed motions claiming that receiver Philip Young was a bureaucrat driving the culturally significant brand into the ground, stifling daily operations, and actively suppressing their sales momentum. She repeatedly petitioned the court to have him removed so she could regain control.
And the internal animosity between the founder and the receiver reached such a toxic level that the federal judge overseeing the case, Charles Ashley Jr., had to take the highly unusual step of intervening in their standard communication protocols.
Which is pretty rare.
Right, very rare. Normally, a receiver is obligated to provide the founders or the board with regular, transparent updates on the financial health of the business they are managing. But Judge Ashley actually had to issue an order stopping the receiver from giving Weaver these biweekly confidential financial reports.
Why would a judge block a founder from seeing the financial reports of her own company?
Because the receiver provided compelling evidence to the court that Weaver was allegedly taking these confidential, dire financial reports, sharing them with her loyal remaining executive team, and actively encouraging them to tweak, manipulate, and spin the sales and budget numbers internally.
Oh, wow.
She was allegedly trying to manufacture a parallel set of documents to make the company look exponentially healthier than the grim reality the receiver was reporting to the judge.
She was still trying to deploy the reality distortion field and spin the PR narrative, even while operating under the direct supervision of a federal court.
Exactly.
The audacity is almost impressive. The receiver eventually told the judge he was so professionally uncomfortable and legally concerned by her actions that he refused to speak with her directly, communicating only through his legal counsel.
It is a textbook, escalating example of a founder completely refusing to accept the reality of insolvency. She still operated under the assumption that if she could just craft a compelling enough narrative, she could talk her way out of a $158 million deficit.
But the federal legal system does not run on charisma or press releases. It runs on hard, verifiable facts. And the compounding facts of the missing records, the unpaid taxes, and the internal sabotage led the court to authorize a drastic, almost unbelievable executive action.
Yes. On June 1st, 2026, receiver Philip G. Young Jr. took the ultimate nuclear step.
The nuclear step.
With the backing of the court, he officially terminated Fawn Weaver from her position as CEO and simultaneously ended her husband Keith Weaver's involvement with the company entirely.
Wow.
He didn't just fire them on paper, he immediately moved to block their physical access to the distillery facilities in Tennessee and systematically cut off their administrative access to all company computer systems and communication channels.
The founders physically locked out of the very empire they built from scratch.
Just out on the street.
The receiver stated in his filings that he didn't make the decision lightly, but that removing the Weavers resulted in significantly less confusion among employees and vendors, making the monumental task of stabilizing operations much smoother. Basically, to save the remaining vital organs of the company, he had to surgically remove the founders who were introducing the chaos.
And we must note that Fawn Weaver absolutely did not go quietly into the night.
No, she didn't.
Just a few months prior to her termination, in March 2026, she attempted an aggressive legal Hail Mary to bypass the receiver entirely. She unilaterally attempted to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection for the company.
Wait, I need you to explain the strategy there. To a layperson, declaring bankruptcy sounds like admitting total defeat. Why would a founder actively want bankruptcy over receivership? Aren't they both just different flavors of corporate death?
They deal with similar financial distress, but legally, they're vastly different tools with entirely different power dynamics.
Okay, how so?
In a standard Chapter 11 bankruptcy reorganization, the existing management team in this case, Fawn Weaver usually petitions the court to stay in control of the day-to-day operations as what is called the debtor in possession. They retain the power to propose the restructuring plan and negotiate with creditors from a position of authority. In a receivership, the court forcefully strips all management of their power and hands the keys to an independent third party, the receiver. The receiver's primary, often exclusive duty is to maximize the financial recovery for the creditors, not to save the founder's equity or protect their legacy.
Got it.
Weaver wanted Chapter 11 because it was her only legal avenue to seize her power back from the receiver.
I see the mechanics now. It wasn't about saving the company. It was a calculated power grab to regain control of the narrative and the assets.
Yeah.
But Judge Charles Ashley Jr. saw right through the maneuver. He threw the bankruptcy filing out completely. He cited the company's deep, irreversible insolvency, But more devastatingly, he formally cited fraudulent conduct regarding the deliberate concealment of that $20 million Jay-Z loan. The federal court fundamentally did not trust the Weavers to run the company honestly or transparently.
And despite this crushing public legal defeat, the formal allegation of fraud by a federal judge and the literal loss of her company, Weaver's public posture remained defiantly, almost surrealistically disconnected from the court's reality.
Yeah, she went right to social media.
She immediately took to Instagram, addressing her hundreds of thousands of followers in live videos. She claimed that Uncle Nearest is stronger than ever and repeatedly stated, "God is good." She meticulously framed herself as a visionary pioneer under unjust attack by a bureaucratic establishment, completely ignoring the mountains of defaulted debt, the evaporated ledgers, and the explicit allegations of fraud.
But Instagram live streams and loyal followers cannot stop the machinery of the federal government. The situation had rapidly escalated far past a complex civil dispute over an unpaid bank loan. It had crossed the Rubicon into criminal and regulatory territory.
Yes, it did.
The receiver's recent reports revealed that two massive, incredibly powerful federal entities had issued comprehensive document subpoenas. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the SDNY, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC.
This is the moment where the stakes elevate from merely losing a business empire to potentially losing your personal freedom.
Oh, yeah.
If we analyze the distinct jurisdictions of these two agencies, they're likely investigating entirely different angles of this systemic collapse. The SEC is a civil regulatory body. They're almost certainly laser-focused on the capitalization table, the legal record of who owns what percentage of the company based on their investments. They want to know exactly what financial representations were made to investors. If Vaughan Weaver was raising venture capital based on a fabricated $1.1 billion valuation, while actively hiding over $100 million in senior debt and failing to file corporate taxes, the SEC will view that as a clear-cut case of defrauding investors by selling equity under false pretenses. They are hunting for securities fraud.
And aren't there investors already suing over this?
Yes. In fact, industry reports indicate that a coordinated group of 20 early investors is already prepping a massive civil lawsuit against the founders for being intentionally misled.
And the SDNY, they aren't regulatory. They are the absolute heavy hitters when it comes to prosecuting complex financial crimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The U.S. Attorney's Office is looking at strict criminal statutes. Their primary focus will undoubtedly be the $108 million loan from Farm Credit. If the federal prosecutors can prove that the company submitted forged borrowing-based certificates, intentionally inflated inventory reports, or deliberately lied on loan applications to secure or maintain that capital, they will indict individuals for federal bank fraud and wire fraud.
Wow.
Furthermore, the mysterious deletion of all financial records prior to 2024 is a glowing, massive red flag for obstruction of justice or the deliberate destruction of evidence. The SDNY possesses the forensic capability to find out exactly whose credentials were used to hit the delete key, and more importantly, they will lean on employees to find out on whose orders that deletion was executed.
So if we pull back and look at the scorched earth left behind, the founders ousted, the federal prosecutor circling, the SEC investigating, and $158 million in debt hanging over the physical distillery, what actually happens to Uncle Nearest? Like, what happens to the physical stills, the barrels sitting in the rickhouses, and the brand itself?
Well, the receiver's mandate is cold and mathematical. Satisfy the secured creditors to the greatest extent possible. And since he couldn't find anyone willing or able to refinance the staggering debt load of an insolvent company with missing ledgers, the only viable option remaining was a comprehensive asset sale.
Just sell it all off.
On May 29, 2026, receiver Philip Young signed a formal letter of intent to sell substantially all of Uncle Nearest's operating assets, the distillery, the intellectual property, the brand name, the inventory to a confidential buyer. The court filings describe the acquirer only as an unnamed, well-capitalized, black-owned investment firm.
And this anonymous buyer has stated their intention to maintain the brand's cultural legacy, keep the existing workforce in Tennessee employed, and continue to honor the history of Nearest Green.
That's the plan.
Meanwhile, the receiver is carving out the non-core assets that were allegedly purchased with diverted loan funds, specifically that $2.2 million Martha's Vineyard estate, and a separate, entirely unrelated vineyard the company had purchased in the Cognac region of France.
I forgot about the French vineyard.
Yeah, that too. Those are being sold off separately to the highest bidder to scrape together whatever cash they can to appease the lenders.
It represents a total, systematic dismantling of the corporate structure that Vaughan Weaver spent years building. But what is truly remarkable And deeply, painfully ironic is that amidst the bankruptcies, the explosive fraud allegations, the incinerated servers, and the looming federal subpoenas, the whiskey itself remains absolutely stellar.
That is the ultimate heartbreaking tragedy here. The physical product, which is crafted by master blender Victoria Edie Butler, who is actually a direct fifth-generation descendant of Nearest Green himself, is a phenomenal achievement in distillation.
It's world class.
It is. In July 2025, right at the exact moment the company was imploding financially and defaulting on its loans, their Master Blend Edition, a highly exclusive release limited to 8,888 bottles, won World's Best Bourbon at the prestigious Bartender Spirits Awards. It won Best Bottled and Blended Tennessee Whiskey. The liquid inside the bottle is a masterpiece of the craft.
It perfectly highlights the profound, deeply unsettling disconnect between the pure art of distilling and the cynical mechanics of corporate greed. You have a literal descendant of Nearest Green, creating award-winning, world-class spirits, honoring her family's profound historical legacy in the truest, most authentic sense.
Yeah.
While simultaneously the executive suite operating above her is allegedly engaged in a frantic, reckless shell game of hidden secondary loans and deleted ledgers that ultimately brings the entire corporate structure crashing down around her brilliant work.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, how should you, listening to the saga, digest the spectacular rise and devastating fall of Uncle Nearest? This was a brand built on a beautiful, vital, and long overdue historical truth. The man, Nearest Green, absolutely deserved to be known. His foundational contribution to American whiskey deserved to be celebrated globally.
Without a doubt.
But that incredible, culturally significant foundation was nearly obliterated by modern financial hubris and a total disregard for operational reality.
For anyone analyzing business or even just investing their own money, the ultimate lesson here is the absolute, non-negotiable necessity of rigorous financial controls.
Reach.
A compelling cultural narrative, the allure of celebrity backing, and the optics of rapid retail expansion are deeply intoxicating. They create a powerful reality distortion field that can blind even sophisticated banks.
But a self-proclaimed billion-dollar valuation is entirely mathematically meaningless if the underlying company is bleeding $1 million a month in cash, hiding secondary debt from its partners, and failing to perform the most basic fundamental duties of a corporation, like filing tax returns.
Right.
A beautiful narrative cannot replace the cold reality of solid accounting. If the underlying numbers don't work, the company will not survive, no matter how righteous or compelling the story is. And it leaves us with a final lingering question, something to really chew on as you look at the brands you support and the stories they tell. Uncle Nearest's entire identity, its unique selling proposition in an incredibly crowded spirits market, was built on correcting historical injustices. It relied heavily on the charismatic, deeply personal, and often highly emotional storytelling of its founder, Fawn Weaver.
It did.
But now that founder has been legally, forcefully ousted for alleged financial misconduct and deception. The physical assets, the award-winning recipes, the very name and legacy of Nearest Green are currently being packaged and sold to a faceless private investment firm simply to pay off angry commercial banks.
It raises a profound question about the commodification of history. When a brand is fundamentally rooted in the concept of historical justice, racial equity, and personal cultural legacy, can it possibly retain its soul when it is reduced to just another line item in a corporate portfolio? Or does the deeply important human legacy of Nearest Green simply become another sanitized marketing tool, owned and optimized by a private equity fund focused only on the next quarterly return?